Welcome to another episode of the podcast. It is Steve Warren along with the coach Greg Kennedy. Coming up today, we're going to talk about the Ridley Greig contract. That's probably your biggest news in Sens Nation this week, though they went on a bit of a slide as well, losing all their first four games of 2025. They did, though, just moments ago as we're recording this, put the boots to the Pittsburgh Penguins in Steeltown, 5-0. That was a fun one to watch. Leevi Merilainen with the shutout, and we'll talk about Michael Andlauer and his selling of his OHL team. All still ahead today here on the program. Greg, how are you today?
I am very good, Stephen. It's a lovely Saturday evening. I don't have to sit in front of the TV and watch the Leafs, so I'm happy to sit down and talk with you, my friend.
Yep, and then afterward, a little NFL playoff action, getting into Baltimore, Pittsburgh. So it is a fun time to be a sports fan for sure. Might as well talk about what's fresh on our minds right now as we're recording this. As I mentioned, the Senators putting a beat down on the Pittsburgh Penguins, 5-0. That did not look like a team that had scored only 4 goals in its last 4 games, all losses. They came out firing early with a couple of quick goals and did not look back, Greg.
It was a 100% all around thorough effort in all departments. The goaltending was superb. Defensive play was great. The PK scored a goal. The power play scored a goal. 5-on-5 scored a goal. They got some depth scoring. They got goals in different ways. The strength of their team on offense is their ability to attack and create off the rush. They showed that. They're very good in the power play, or usually are. They showed that. The PK looked like, as I said, every element of the game they thoroughly dominated. It was a fun game to watch. Plus, there was a little bit of nastiness involved, Steve. It was a good game all around. I liked it.
Yeah, hate is good for hockey. I think we can agree on that. And I wonder where it all came from. Like, it's not like these guys are, played 2 games in their last 3, or, there's historical animosity, I suppose, but not many of the Sens lived through that. Really, it's just the Penguins' big 3 who can go back to 2017, for example. But, I mean, there is some blood there, bad blood, I guess, just because they've met the Penguins more times than any other team in the playoffs. But no, that seemed to come out of nowhere a little bit. I mean, I know it's a free-for-all right now for that final wild card spot. We're not even at the halfway point, and that one really did have the feel of a playoff game. They're huge points for both teams. They're both out of the playoffs, outside looking in right now, but not that far out. And so I guess they played it accordingly.
Yeah, and the Drake was on in one of the intermissions, and he said that Travis Green had stressed to them to be emotional, to bring some emotion to the game, and they did have a closed door meeting yesterday. So maybe that was something that was discussed amongst the players, was to, get the rust out, and at the very least, let's show up emotionally and be physical, and then see what that can get us. And it was obviously a concerted effort. Like from the first shift, they were feistier than they've been in a long time. It was nice to see. I can understand people who don't like Nick Cousins. He's not a beautiful skater. He's not a great player. He's not a good looking man. But I like watching the guy play, Steve. Like he looks good on the ice when he's doing what he's doing, and when he's doing it at his best, he's a pest, and he's what was needed around here for a long time. Yeah, I really like watching Nick Cousins play.
Yeah, high energy, chippy. And today was the first time he was really that get under your skin SOB. He's had nights, but I don't know that he's had a night like the one he had in Pittsburgh. Like, he and Michael Bunting were at it all game long. And now I'd like to see him stay out of the penalty box. He did take 3 minor penalties in the game, but it was just one of those games. And I agree. I like Nick Cousins' game. I think he's been a real asset. And I'm going to compare him to a guy who signed a new contract in just a moment here, but we'll get to that in a second. Shane Pinto, good to see him going. I could not believe the stat that they threw out during the TSN broadcast. So the Sens took a 3-0 lead after the first period, and Shane Pinto had 2 of the goals. I believe he's the first, by the way, since Milan McCulloch in 2012, 2013, something like that, to get a power play goal and a shorty in the same period. But it's nice to see him starting to simmer. He's been a very good hockey player. I think Drake Batherson referenced him as the best Senator over the last 3 weeks for the club. Anyway, winning the game 5-0. And it was a chippy one, as we mentioned. I was very pleased to see Alex Nedeljkovic end up getting, well, by hockey standards, just slaughtered. He
Yep.
gets chased from the game after allowing 5 goals on 16 shots. And the reason we're obviously Sens Nation here. That's the name of the podcast. But just the way Nedeljkovic was behaving after that collision between Chris Letang and Cole Reinhardt, he basically goes over, and they didn't say it. They didn't really show a good angle of it. They just said that he tripped Cole Reinhardt. Nedeljkovic actually went up and literally classlessly slew-footed the guy. And
Mhm.
I don't know if that's why Reinhardt left the game after the first period. He left and did not return. He took a couple big hits in that first period, but I was glad to see Nedeljkovic get worked over in that hockey game, to be honest.
Oh yeah, especially after that. And I loved the Letang Ridley Greig thing or sorry, Cole Reinhardt thing where he just kind of Letang comes across and tries to give him a little bump and no, sir, not going to work. Reinhardt barely even threw his body into it. He just defended the shove or the push or the hit from Letang, and Letang went flying into his own net. That was gorgeous. And then all the schmozzle that happened after that, watching Nedeljkovic, you're right. There was a good view. The camera from the other end of the ice, low end cameras, you could see it there. That camera view, and it's been out on X since the game, showing that Nedeljkovic skated by and just kind of rubbed his skate into the back of Cole Reinhardt's skate. But he also took a pretty serious schmuck into the boards from behind earlier in the period too. So he might have been feeling something, and then ended up having to shut her down early. But there's another thing though. You got Cole
Yeah, the hit
Reinhardt.
from
How about?
yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say the hit from behind, the collision with Chris Letang while he won it, it was still a pretty hard one, and then the slew
Mhm,
foot where he falls on his back. It could have
mhm.
been maybe a combination of 2 or 3 of those things that happened all in a very short period of time.
Now, what's your thoughts on the call ups, the situation here with the Senators? You've had a potpourri, a plethora of players getting called up and sent down. And Yan Yannick played the other night. You have Matthew Highmore played tonight. Cole Reinhardt's been up and down. Um, no sign of Angus Crookshank. Tyler Boucher, I'm on record as saying leave him alone, let him stay down there all year. But I just think it's interesting that the Senators, it hasn't been a standard. This is the guy, and the guys on a elastic band, up down, up down, up down. They've kind of sprinkled different guys in here and there, and I think it's been kind of cool for guys to get an opportunity to come up and play.
Yeah, you could throw. A Stapchuk would be a guy that if everybody was
Yep.
healthy, he'd be on the bubble. Cole Reinhardt's been pretty steady as well. Even look defensively. We haven't talked about this. Jacob Bernard Docker going into the end boards at practice, suffering a high ankle sprain. He's going to be out for a while, and Travis Hamonic out for a while. So we had Nicholas Matinpalo. He'd been getting into some games anyway. It was interesting that at the practice on Monday, where Bernard Docker got injured, he was being used as a 7th defenseman at that practice on the same
Right.
morning Matinpalo was called up. It was kind of weird for Bernard Docker because he wakes up Monday morning knowing that Hamonic would be out 2 to 4 weeks. So he's going, okay, I'm going to get some regular action. Then suddenly Matinpalo is called up that morning and slides right into the top 6 where he's been ever since that practice. So, yeah, it sucks for Jacob Bernard Docker because, and we'll talk about Matinpalo's performance thus far, but I don't think Travis Green is a very big Jacob Bernard Docker fan when you get down to it.
No, and I would agree. I think that what works against JBD is what is he? Like he's not a world class puck mover. He's not a one man breakout guy. He's not an offensive guy that's going to light up in a power play. He's not a big physical menacing shutdown guy. He's just a body. He's just a guy who can give you 15 minutes on the right side there on your third pair and do his thing. So he doesn't really do anything in the upper echelons of elitism. He's just there. And I think giving Matt and Paolo a
Yeah.
look, and I think it started that way. Like, let's give this guy a look and see what he can do. And he played a couple games. He went back down. Then when he comes back up, they slot him in at number 6 because they see him as being better than JBD. And now he's going to get a nice little stretch. He's a real nice, simple, basic calming influence, but also some size and some physicality that JBD doesn't bring. The physicality you try to get. Hamonic tries to be physical, but he's just too old and too slight and too light nowadays to be able to play that kind of game. I think Matt and Paolo and Clevin make a nice pair of two big bookends back there that can bring some physical presence.
Yeah, I'd agree, and I like Matt and Powell for that reason too. The simplicity, that's a good word to use. He's not high event hockey at all, to the good and the bad. He's basically, he does his job. He's not going to wow you with anything flashy, but he's pinning guys in the corner, and he's just generally doing the right things out there. We'll see if that continues. It's very early in the game, but I
Yeah.
like what I've seen so far. It's funny you mentioned Jacob Bernard Docker and the way you kind of describe him as, you know, where does his actual strength lie? And I guess that's the way I've always, and obviously we magnify this because he makes $8 million a year. That's a little where I'm at with Thomas Chabot. Like, if you're making $8 million a year, I want you to be either physically ferocious or defensively elite or in the top 50 in point getters among defensemen. And Thomas
Mm-hmm.
Chabot is none of those things. And so I think that's
Right.
probably where I have a bit of an issue. Not to mention these calamitous moments like the 4-0 loss to the Buffalo Sabres. The guy, I guess, in honor of Brooke Henderson being honored that night, he was 4 under, -4 in that hockey game. So he has these moments where he is high event hockey to the negative, but there have been good games, and I thought he was really good against the Pittsburgh Penguins in the 5-0 victory. So I will acquiesce to this. While I'm not his hugest fan, and that's, I guess, an understatement to anybody who listens to the program and to you, Greg, but I have seen marked improvement in Thomas Chabot this season.
Yes, he's been far better all year, and we've discussed this. It's all due to Nick Jensen, and the bounce back was the most impressive thing. The Buffalo game, he was absolutely god awful. It looked like any number of games that he would have played over the course of the last couple of years. But then
Mhm.
I thought he was their best defenseman against Pittsburgh. He looked real good. He looked real good again. So that's, I mean, that is the problem with this team, right? The only thing this team seems to do consistently is perform inconsistently, right? It's constant. It's constant. It's up, it's down, it's up, it's down. And it's not even individuals. It seems to be the entire collective group is either playing like world beaters or playing like we're going to lose 4-0 to Buffalo. It just seems to be one or the other. It's very rare that they're just a middle of the road, that they play a game and they win 3-2 and you go home bored. You know, uh, they either are played to perfection or they like, oh my God, what are they doing now? Keystone Cop stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. During the 4-game slide, my thought was that maybe it's going to take more time for these guys to get over the hump because they were allowed. The reference I used metaphorically was like they're racehorses, and suddenly Travis Green has come in and asked them to do the work of a plow horse.
Mm-hmm.
And the defensive side of the game is big, but at some point, you have to try and balance things out. I think there's a reason that they only had 4 goals in the last 4 games, because I think sometimes you get stuck on that fine balance between defense first thinking and then doing all the elite skilled things you do that got you to the NHL. I'm speaking of the Stutzlas and the Bathersons and the Norrises.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a bigger adjustment period than people think, particularly after they were all allowed to kind of run free and get paid their king's ransom under the DJ Smith years.
But that's the exact thing that leads to the inconsistency, is that when they don't play well or don't look good, when they're losing, it's because they forget all of that thoroughbred stuff that's in them. They may still play a half decent game defensively, but still lose, and they can't produce offensively. But the Pittsburgh game today, you saw it, the transition, the up tempo, the speed, the attacking off the rush, a lot less dumping against Pittsburgh today. Um, just that is that high end offense that is there. It seems to me now that's when they get into slumps. It used to be they got into slumps because
Right.
they couldn't stop a beach ball, they have bad goaltending, or they're all giveaways in their own zone. They can't cover the right guys. Defensive zone was a mess, and they'd lose 5 in a row. Now, when they go into a slump, it seems it's because the offense dries up, and I think that's just a matter of, as you just sort of alluded to, the high end guys start playing a little less, a little more conservative when it comes to the offense, and they want to play more smarter in their own zone, and they give up on the whole idea of attacking and trying to create offense, and they get into these scoring slumps.
It's such a fine balance, and there's so much parity in the league. It doesn't take much to knock you off stride. I heard Jamie Baker on TSN 1200 talking about even something as simple as the flu, which was reportedly going through the Sens dressing room. That can knock you off stride just enough as they enter 2025 to pull into one of these types of funks that they just came out of in Pittsburgh. And I just look at the scoring in general. Like, you could go back to the Guy Boucher effect in 2017-18. This is after they had just gone to the conference final. And then with pretty much the same core group, they came out and looked like garbage the following year. I think they had a decent first month, but then I think they became going from a one goal away from the Stanley Cup final to, I think, might have been 30th place in the NHL, if I'm not mistaken. They were just god awful the following year. And I think part of it is playing defense for these guys who like to be racehorses and they like to get their goals and enjoy the fun of that part of the game. I think if you grind them every day and make the game something that you just treat as work now, you start hating going to the rink. I think that at some stage that reduces your effectiveness. So it's just sort of another example of what we're talking about here, where guys who are super skilled are being asked to take on this role that they not only don't like very much, but they may not be very good at it, and it may take the wind out of their sails a little bit, particularly if the losses start to pile up. You're not getting rewarded for this, working as the plow horse. That can be tedious for sure.
Well, it's also they're elite level athletes. So this just in, they
Yep.
have egos, right? They have egos. So when it doesn't take much to look around and see that who gets the cookies, who gets the most praise from the coach, who gets the extra minutes from the coach. And it was under Guy Boucher, certain workman-like two-way guys, 200-foot guys, strong in our own zone guys, they got the cookies, they got the praise, they got the extra ice time. So I'm an offensive guy, but I realize that that's the way the coach is going to give me a pat in the back. So I've got to do that stuff. And you just kind of lay off doing anything else, right? You just kind of, okay, I've done my hard work in my own zone. I think I had a pretty good shift. I'm going to dump it in and get off now. And it just becomes a matter of doing what you think you have to do in order to get the praise. And maybe Travis Green has a much more democratic way of handing out praise, right? And that he can see that he has people who, like, you're not going to give Timmy Stützle as hard a time in his own zone as you would a Nick Cousins. It's just the way it is as a coach, right? You have a certain expectation level of performance from a superstar offensive guy playing defensively versus a third or fourth line guy playing defensively. So that comes into how he heaps out his praise. And I think that affects people. That gives them confidence. If I'm rewarding you with ice time and I'm rewarding you with pats on the back and open praise in front of everyone for doing something really great creatively, offensively, then that feeds your ego. But at the same time, I can praise somebody else for being great defensively. It doesn't have to be all about defensive play.
Right. All right, so the Senators get 5 goals in Pittsburgh, which is more goals than they scored in total in the last 4 games against Dallas, St. Louis, Detroit, and Buffalo. So that's a good thing. And let's hear from the aforementioned Travis Green, this courtesy of the Ottawa Senators YouTube channel, after the 5-0 win over the Penguins.
We had a lot of emotion in our game.
We were looking for that and a little bit more emotion from previous games.
Yeah, we were. We talked about it tonight before the game, and getting our confidence back, believe in yourself, and play with emotion.
Right guy scored too, right?
Yeah, I mean, you were hoping eventually some guys would get going, and that's nice to get 5 in the first 2 for sure.
Nice to get none against as well. Quick comment on young Leevi's performance.
Yeah, he was great. Solid, looked composed. Didn't look out of position really all night.
So there's Travis Green in conversation with the media, courtesy of the Sens YouTube channel. Up on the housetop. Oh, hey. It's Steve here for Celebrate. I'm just putting on my old school Christmas lights with these obnoxious little plastic clips in minus 30-degree temperature at the top of this ladder 12 feet off the ground. No, I'm not doing any of that anymore. No, sir. Celebrate.ca. I urge you to check them out today. Celebrate is your permanent holiday lighting solution. So many options. St. Paddy's Day green, Team Canada red and white, orange for Halloween, and the beautiful colors of Christmas. And Celebrate is all controlled from your smartphone. And Celebrite's installers were absolutely fantastic and professional. I urge you to check them out today, celebrite.ca. It's a wobbly ladder.
This is Ryan. Ryan would love to start his own podcast as a fun way to create content for all his platforms, to better connect with his customers and build a new audience. But Ryan isn't great with technology, and he has a lot of questions. What's the easiest way to record a high-quality podcast? Does he need to travel to a studio? What equipment will he need? How does he get his podcast online? What if he has an out-of-town guest? Capital Podcast had all of Ryan's answers. After a free consultation, we took care of everything for him. All Ryan had to worry about was jumping on the mic and starring in his own show. He's recording this week's episode right from his office. His expert guest this week is one of his customers who's in a Chicago hotel room. And Capital Podcast is online with them, making sure the final product is perfect. Easy, convenient, professional. Contact us today and star in your own show with capitalpodcast.ca.
And this will be a short shelf life for this particular topic because, like I say, we're coming at you moments after the Sens won 5-0 over Pittsburgh, but they go again on Sunday, 5 o'clock against the Dallas Stars. And I guess the question, at least here in the short term, is, are you rolling with Leevi Merilainen, who got the shutout, a 30-save shutout, and the team really seemed to look a lot more comfortable in front of him as opposed to how they've looked in 2 of the last 3 games with Anton Forsberg? Might you roll with him? Merilainen, I'm talking about, back-to-back?
My first choice would be Merilainen. The only reason I wouldn't play Merilainen is if he says to me, "Hey, coach, I suck in back-to-backs," or "Coach, I don't feel well. I might be a little tired." I don't understand why you're playing a back-to-back. Why does it have to be at 5 o'clock? Why can't it be 7 o'clock? You don't think they'd like those extra 2 hours? Like, you're going to play at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on the road, fly home. Yeah, they'll be home in a decent hour tonight. They might even be home already, for crying out loud, for all we know. But you got to play at 5 o'clock tomorrow afternoon against a team that's playing in Montreal tonight. Is going to take an hour and a half or so to get to Ottawa. Or I guess they would fly, wouldn't they? But I hate the fact it's a 5 o'clock game. But to answer your question, yes, I would go with Leevi Merilainen, and I would ride him as much as the kid can keep playing because I love him way better than Forsberg. His numbers are better than Forsberg. And if he's going to be your number 2 guy or your 1B guy moving forward, let's give him the minutes and let's let him play.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I know that there'll be those who say that, in back-to-backs, goalies who try and do both, the teams tend to, have a lesser record because of it. It may open you up for the potential for injury. That latter part, I don't buy. He's 22 years old. And like you say, if he's feeling good after last night, I would tend to roll with him because it wouldn't be a question if we were talking about, I don't know, let's say the NHL schedule got weird. Like it was pretty commonplace, like back in the day for there to be 2 back-to-back games in the NHL playoffs. And the star goalie would certainly play both games. And I'm not saying we're at playoff time yet, but this is a team that is hanging on by its fingernails. And you could see it by the way the Sens and Penguins played this afternoon in Pittsburgh. They understand the urgency of the situation. They know that if they fall off here, obviously that second wild card isn't going to be won in January, but it can be lost in January with the number of teams that are chasing this down. So I would argue that, unfortunately for the Sens and the Penguins and about 6 or 7 other teams, their playoffs are on right now. So I would argue there is that level of urgency. And so you got to put your best foot forward. And I don't think anybody who's watching the Ottawa Senators for the last 3 weeks would suggest that Forsberg is putting your best foot forward at this point. So I tend to agree with you.
Completely. And you can't take your foot off the gas either. Like look at Columbus is in a playoff spot. Who would have thought that? They won 7 out of 10. Detroit's won 6 in a row. Montreal's won like 9 out of 11. These were not the teams I was expecting them to be fighting with. And Washington is leading the whole thing, for crying out loud. You thought it was going to be maybe the Islanders and the Capitals and Pittsburgh, fighting it out there. But there's other teams there. You cannot afford that 4 losses in a row might really be we may end up looking back on that in April going, man, that hurt.
Moving on, I want to talk about the Ridley Greig deal. That was one of the big pieces of news this week. He signed this week with the Ottawa Senators a brand new extension. He was to be an RFA at the end of this season, and he got a 4-year contract worth $3.25 million. I won't checker your feelings about it with anything I have to say. I'm curious to know what you thought of the contract.
I think it's great. I think it's a great deal on both sides. If I'm Ridley Greig, I'm thrilled to sign that deal. If I'm Ridley Greig, I'm looking at the depth chart on this team thinking, well, I probably project out at best of being a second line guy. I'm more than likely I'm going to project out to be a third line guy. And that's pretty good money for a third line guy. And if I'm the Senators, I'm thinking, he's a middle six guy, and this is a right number. And we've rewarded a guy who's worked hard and shown that he can compete and play at this level. And I like it. I really do like the deal. And I hope you do too. I don't think we disagree on that, do we?
I do like the deal. I think it initially, there's part of the deal that's paying for what you hope he'll be.
Okay.
Because right now, at this point in time, and I bring back the Nick Cousins reference from earlier in the show, I believe Ridley Greig at this moment in time is just a younger version of Nick Cousins. They're almost identical to me. The guy, they're 9 years apart in age, so that's the big difference. They both make $800,000. They both have 12 points on the season. They're both energy guys, feisty, and get out the other team's skin. I think they're the same player. But you're paying for potential, as you do with every young player. And if you're going to start worrying about overvaluing guys maybe a little bit, maybe we overpaid that guy a little bit. I feel like the worst case scenario, he's already proven he could be Nick Cousins. And if Nick Cousins were making 3.25, I wouldn't be happy about it. But it wouldn't be, the overpayment that I'm seeing potentially on other contracts on this team right now. So it would be a very minor story. But I do think if I'm to project out, he will add offense to his game beyond anything that Nick Cousins has ever done so far in his career. But he, for the time being, he had 26 points last year. He's on pace for exactly 26 points again this year. So for this level of money, I would hope that maybe not in the first year, but by year 2 of this contract, he's a guy that you can reliably count on for 35 a year.
I see him being more of a Brendan Gallagher, Travis Konechny, maybe not quite as good as Travis Konechny, but Brendan Gallagher type guy, middle six guy with some feistiness that could score some goals. Now, Brendan Gallagher gets paid a ridiculous amount of money. He had a couple good years, and they signed him to a huge chunk of change, and I'm sure they'd love to get out from under that. But I see Ridley Greig more in there, a middle six guy who's going to score 20 goals. That's where I see him eventually.
Wow. Okay. Well, that would be an absolute slam dunk, and that's what it comes down to. Where do you project Ridley Greig to be, in the second half of this contract? And that will, if it's what you're expecting, then this is going to be a crazy bargain by year 2. So we'll see how it all plays out. And am I in love with the deal? I think you probably, if you wanted to, you could have grinded a little more if you thought, but. Again, you're paying for potential. That's the standard. That's the norm these days. And there's a little of me that comes from the old school side of things, and I'm sure you do too to some degree when you see the number $3.25 million, right? That seems like such a big number, but it is a rank and file NHL number now. It really is. If you look at the NHL salary list, and I did this, there are 350 guys in the league. It's roughly half who make $3.25 million a year or more. So when you think about it in those terms, it really is kind of the price of doing business.
It's a middle lineup guy. That's what you pay for them.
Yep. Agreed. Finally, Michael Andlauer in the news. Couple of reasons. He had a good interview with Claire Hanna on TSN, although he seemed to be choosing his words very, very carefully. Like he went in kind of in this fun-loving mode. And I found that as it went on, it's like, ooh, this is all serious stuff. I better really consider things. But he did give us a couple of nuggets in that despite a lot of the reports that are out there that the Belleville Senators might be finding a new home, he confirmed that, Belleville is not going anywhere.
I think it's great. And the other part of the news was that he sold the Hamilton / Brantford Battalion or Brantford Bulldogs, right? That was the other news.
Correct. Yeah, they've decided to sell off. We won't have it's all reports at this stage of the game, and we should give credit to CHCH Television in Hamilton for breaking that news. The official announcement will be coming on Monday, which would be the 13th, and then a press conference on the 15th, this coming Wednesday. So we'll get some details on why he's selling. But you can imagine, right? It's been a very eventful early run for him as the owner of the Ottawa Senators. He's got ATS Healthcare and all his other mega businesses and such. I got to think that something had to give at some point. I think that he's probably fairly satiated by being the owner of the Ottawa Senators in the NHL and the Belleville Senators of the AHL. I'm not shocked that this news went down, but the fact that it's Zach Hyman of the Edmonton Oilers and his family buying the thing, that sort of comes out of the blue.
Yeah, whatever. Hey, who's ever ponying up with the check? I guess you're not too picky about it.
Right. Yeah. I wonder if it'll end up going back to Hamilton. It's not as dramatic. When you actually look at the map, it's like if the Ottawa Senators moved to, I don't know, Orleans. Right? It's not that far apart between Brantford and Hamilton, so it's not a huge deal. That's why they've had so many shuffles back and forth, right back to the days, in the 70s and 80s when Hamilton's OHL team moved to Brantford to become the Alexanders, and then they left about 8 years later to go back to Hamilton. So kind of interesting the way those teams have stick-handled the franchises back and forth in the Ontario Hockey League. But Michael Andlauer divesting himself of them, and we'll find out more details as to why he's decided to do that later on this week. And with that, we'll call it a day, ladies and gentlemen. Don't forget that our website is sensnationhockey.com. And as always, I encourage you to visit thehockeynews.com/Ottawa. I'm the site editor over there. All kinds of cool Sens articles. Graham Nichols, regular guest on the show, does some writing there as well as a number of other great writers too. So check that out, thn.com/Ottawa. And that will do it. I love the t-shirt, by the way. I didn't mention that off the top of the show. For those of you watching on YouTube, the classic Butch Goring 1971-72 OPC hockey card set. We both agreed off the air to start the show. That's our favorite set of our childhood of all time.
And it's purple.
An absolute beauty.
Purple. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, good night, Steve.
Did you know?
Had fun.
All right. I guess we'll wrap it up there. The delay, I apologize, is a bit of a delay. I'm, it's like try to introduce new subjects and you're talking about something else still. And we apologize for that. Internet, what are you going to do? It's Elon Musk's Starlink, which powers this program. So blame Elon. In the meantime, enjoy your evening and we'll talk to you next time.